Commander Vexhai floated in the observation chamber of the starship Harmony's Edge, watching the planet below through the large window. The world looked dead and gray, covered in strange metal towers that twisted into the sky like fingers reaching for help. Dark clouds swirled around these towers, and sometimes flashes of green light would pulse between them. Vexhai's skin changed colors as different thoughts passed through his mind. The Alteran people had always been this way. Their emotions showed in the shifting blues and purples across their smooth faces. Right now his skin showed worry and curiosity mixed together. "Sir, the human ships have arrived," said his aide, stepping into the chamber. Vexhai turned to look at the small fleet that had just appeared in space near them. The human vessels looked strange compared to the sleek Alliance ships. Where Alteran ships were smooth curves of living metal, human ships were all hard angles and thick armor plating. They looked like they were built for war. Vexhai had read about humans in the Alliance files. They were one of the newest species to join the galactic community. Most Alliance members had needed thousands of years to develop space travel. Humans had done it in just a few centuries. Some called them fast learners. Others called them dangerous. The door to the observation chamber opened and 3 figures walked in. Vexhai recognized them from their files, the human military representatives assigned to this mission. The first was Captain Jinwoo, a tall man with dark hair and calm eyes. He moved with the steady confidence of someone used to making life and death decisions. Behind him walked Lieutenant Minji, shorter but with alert eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. The third was a woman introduced as Daeun, who carried a large bag of equipment that clinked softly as she walked. "Commander Vexhai," Captain Jinwoo said, bowing slightly in what Vexhai had learned was a human gesture of respect. "Thank you for allowing us to join this mission." Vexhai's skin shifted to welcoming green tones. "Of course, Captain. Though I must ask, are your people prepared for what we might face down there? The intelligence report suggests the Void Cult has found something very dangerous." Minji stepped forward, her eyes bright with what Vexhai thought might be excitement. "We've read the reports, sir. Ancient artifacts, possible weapons technology, reality distortion fields. Sounds like Tuesday to us." Vexhai found this response puzzling. Tuesday was just a day of the week in the human calendar. Why would dangerous artifacts remind them of Tuesday? He decided it must be some kind of human expression he didn't understand. The diplomatic team tried to negotiate with the Void Cult for 3 months, Vexhai explained, gesturing toward the planet. They refused to respond to any communication. "We believe they are excavating something from deep beneath the surface. The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases." Daeun set down her bag and opened it, revealing an impressive collection of devices and tools. Some looked like Alliance technology, but others were clearly human-made. They had that same practical, heavy-duty appearance as human ships. "What kind of energy readings?" she asked. "Psychic interference mainly, something that affects the minds of most Alliance species. Our telepaths report feeling wrong when they try to scan the area, like something is watching them back." The 3 humans exchanged looks. Vexhai caught something in their expressions, not fear but recognition, as if they had heard of such things before. "How many cult members are we expecting?" Jinwoo asked. "Unknown. Possibly hundreds. But that's not our main concern." Vexhai activated a holographic display showing the planet's surface. The image focused on a massive spiral structure that seemed to descend deep into the ground. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected this. It wasn't there before. Whatever they found, they're building around it. Minji whistled softly, a sound Vexhai had learned humans made when impressed or concerned. "That's a big hole. The structure extends at least 15 kilometers down, possibly deeper, and the energy emanating from it is growing stronger every day." Vexhai's skin shifted to worried purples. "Our scientists believe that if this continues, it could affect the entire star system." Daeun was studying the hologram carefully, making notes on a small device. "What's our insertion plan?" "Joint strike teams," Vexhai explained. "Alteran Psi warriors for reconnaissance and mental protection. Krillian heavy assault troops for main combat operations. And your human squad for..." He paused, not sure how to phrase it politely. "For whatever weird stuff happens that nobody planned for." Jinwoo finished with a small smile. Vexhai's skin showed surprise. "That's remarkably accurate." "Humans are good at dealing with unexpected problems," Minji said. "It's kind of our thing." As they talked, Vexhai found himself studying the humans more carefully. In all his years of military service, he had worked alongside dozens of different species. Alterans relied on telepathic coordination. Krillians used their natural energy manipulation. Zephyrians could phase through solid matter. Each species had evolved special abilities that made them valuable to the Alliance. Humans seemed to have no special abilities at all. They couldn't read minds or manipulate energy or phase through walls. They were physically weaker than Krillians and mentally less gifted than Alterans. By all logical measures, they should be the least useful members of any military operation. So why had they volunteered for the most dangerous assignments? And why did other Alliance species seem uncomfortable around them during combat situations? Commander, the ship's communication officer announced over the intercom. We're receiving urgent signals from the planet's surface. The energy readings just spiked dramatically. Vexai moved quickly to the central console, his skin flashing urgent reds. The display showed energy levels jumping far beyond what their models had predicted. Whatever was happening down there, it was happening much faster than anyone had expected. How long until the strike teams can deploy? He asked. 20 minutes for full preparation, came the reply. Vexai looked at the humans. I'm afraid we may not have 20 minutes. Are your people ready to deploy immediately? The three humans looked at each other for exactly 2 seconds. Then Jinwoo nodded. We're ready now. Now? But you haven't had time to study the terrain data or coordinate with the other teams or… Sir, Minji interrupted gently. With respect, we've been ready since we got here. Humans don't really need a lot of preparation time. Daeun had already shouldered her equipment bag and was checking some kind of weapon that definitely wasn't standard Alliance issue. Besides, if this thing is as dangerous as you think, waiting around probably isn't going to help. Vexai stared at them for a moment, his skin cycling through confused colors. Then alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The energy readings from the planet had doubled again. All strike teams to the deployment bay, he ordered. We go now. As they hurried through the ship's corridors, Vexai couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to learn something important about humans. Something that the Alliance files had failed to mention. The transport ship shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Vexai gripped his restraints tighter as the vessel fought against winds that seemed to blow in impossible directions. Through the small window he could see the twisted landscape below. Metal spires jutting from cracked ground, pools of liquid that glowed with sick green light, and strange crystalline formations that hurt to look at directly. Atmosphere is toxic, announced the pilot. Everyone will need environmental suits. Vexai watched as the different species prepared for deployment. The Alteran Psi warriors activated their mental shields, their skin glowing soft blue as they linked their minds together. The Krillian heavy troops powered up their energy weapons and checked their thick armor plating. Captain Sunho, the Krillian commander, was a massive being covered in natural scales that could deflect most energy attacks. Then there were the humans. Jinwoo, Minji, and Daeun put on simple environmental suits that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced gear worn by other species. Their weapons were equally basic, kinetic projectile weapons that fired solid metal bullets instead of energy beams. Vexai had read that human technology was considered outdated by Alliance standards. Landing in 60 seconds, the pilot called out. The ship touched down with a hard thump. As the ramp lowered, Vexai felt his skin crawl with unease. Even through his suit's filters, something about this place felt wrong. The very air seemed to whisper at the edges of his mind. The strike force moved out across the barren landscape. The gravity here was lighter than standard, but somehow walking felt more difficult than it should. Each step seemed to take extra effort, as if the ground itself was reluctant to be walked upon. Energy readings are coming from that direction, Vexai said, pointing toward a cluster of metal spires about 2 kilometers away. We should proceed with caution. The psychic interference is quite strong. As they walked, Vexai noticed that some of the Alliance soldiers were beginning to show signs of strain. The Alteran Psi warriors kept stopping to reinforce their mental shields. Even the tough Krillians seemed uncomfortable, their scales shifting to darker colors that indicated stress. The humans, however, seemed completely unaffected. They walked with steady confidence, their eyes alert but untroubled. When Minji caught Vexai looking at her, she just shrugged. Creepy place, she said. But we've seen worse. Vexai found this hard to believe. What could be worse than a planet that attacked the mind just by existing? They reached the spires after an hour of difficult walking. Up close, the structures were even more disturbing. They weren't built. They had grown like some kind of metal fungus pushing up from deep underground. The surfaces were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. The entrance should be around here somewhere, HFY said, consulting his scanner. Dae-Yoon was studying one of the spires with professional interest. These aren't just decorative, she said. There's some kind of transmission array, broadcasting something into space. Broadcasting what? Asked Captain Sunho, his deep voice rumbling through the comm system. Before Dae-Yoon could answer, shapes appeared from behind the spires. At first glance, they looked like alliance species. Altorans, Krillians, even some that might have been human. But something was terribly wrong with them. Their movements were too sharp, too angular. Their eyes glowed with the same sick green light as the pools scattered across the planet. Void cult, HFY whispered, his skin flashing warning colors. The corrupted beings moved toward them with unnatural speed. The Altaran Psi warriors tried to scan their minds and immediately recoiled in pain. Whatever these things were thinking, it was so alien and wrong that telepathic contact was physically harmful. Fall back, HFY ordered. Maintain defensive positions. The Krillian heavy troops opened fire with their energy weapons. The bright beams struck the corrupted beings but seemed to have little effect. The creatures kept coming, making sounds that might have been speech but hurt to listen to. HFY watched in growing alarm as his carefully planned operation began to fall apart. The Alliance forces were trained to fight normal enemies, not beings that could damage minds just by being observed. Then the humans acted. Minji raised her kinetic weapon and fired 3 quick shots. The solid metal bullets punched through the first creature's torso, and it collapsed immediately. Unlike energy weapons, simple physical force seemed to work perfectly well. Switch to kinetic rounds, Jinwoo called to the other Alliance forces, but most of their weapons couldn't be reconfigured quickly enough. Dae-Yoon had produced what looked like a small explosive device. She threw it toward a cluster of the corrupted beings and dove for cover. The explosion was surprisingly effective, not just destroying the creatures but seeming to disrupt whatever energy held them together. How did you know to do that? HFY asked as they took shelter behind one of the spires. Basic problem solving, Jinwoo replied calmly. Energy weapons weren't working, so we tried physical force. Physical force worked, so we used more of it. It sounded so simple when he said it, but HFY realized that most Alliance species would have needed time to analyze the situation, run tests, and develop a new strategy. The humans had simply tried something different and moved on. The immediate threat dealt with. They found the entrance to the underground facility. It was a circular opening in the ground, lined with the same strange metal as the spires. A ramp spiraled down into darkness that seemed thicker than normal darkness should be. I'm reading massive energy signatures from deep below, reported one of the Altaran scouts. But the psychic interference is so strong I can barely function. HFY looked at his strike force. Half the Altorans were already showing signs of mental strain. Several Krillians were reporting that their energy-based biological systems felt unstable. At this rate, they would lose most of their effectiveness before reaching whatever lay at the bottom. Maybe some of us should stay here and guard the entrance, suggested Captain Sunho, though his voice carried reluctance. No, said Minji, checking her weapon. We all go down together. That's how you handle unknown situations. You don't split your force. HFY was surprised by her confidence. Lieutenant, the psychic interference down there could be lethal to most of our species. Then it's good we're here, she replied. Humans don't seem to be affected much by whatever this is. As they began their descent into the spiral passage, HFY found himself walking close to the humans. The walls around them pulsed with faint light, and sometimes he could swear he heard whispers in languages that had never existed. The other Alliance members were struggling more with each step downward, but the humans remained steady. They moved with the same calm confidence they had shown on the surface, as if walking through a nightmare was just another part of their job. How are you doing this? HFY finally asked Jinwoo. The human captain was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Commander, how many wars has your species fought? Wars? We had some territorial disputes thousands of years ago, but the Altaran people have been peaceful for most of our recorded history. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire existence, Jinwoo said. We've seen what people can do to each other when they really try. After that, strange alien influences don't seem so impossible to deal with. HFY thought about this as they continued downward. The Alliance species had all evolved past their violent phases before reaching the stars. They had developed advanced abilities and peaceful societies. Perhaps that was why they were so vulnerable to this kind of psychological attack. They had no experience with true horror. As they descended deeper, the whispers grew louder and the walls began to show images that made no sense, shapes that existed in too many dimensions, colors that shouldn't exist, faces that looked familiar but wrong in ways that couldn't be described. And at the bottom of the spiral, they found the source of all the wrongness on this planet. The chamber at the bottom of the spiral was enormous, so large that their lights couldn't reach the far walls. But what filled the space was impossible to describe properly. HFY tried to look at it directly and felt his mind recoil in pain. It was alive, but not in any way that made sense. Parts of it existed in normal space, while other parts seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist. When HFY tried to focus on its shape, his eyes reported different information each time. Sometimes it looked like a massive serpent coiled in on itself. Other times it appeared to be a collection of geometric shapes that hurt to perceive. And sometimes it looked almost like a face so large and alien that seeing it made HFY want to forget how to think. Around the chamber, dozens of Void cult members knelt in worship. They were channeling psychic energy toward the creature, feeding it power from captive Alliance members suspended in crystalline pods along the walls. The entity was using this energy to wake up from whatever ancient sleep it had been in. The moment the strike force entered the chamber, every Alliance member except the humans began to suffer. The Alteron Psi warriors collapsed immediately, their mental shields shattered by contact with something so fundamentally wrong. Captain Sunho and his Krillians tried to maintain formation, but their movements became jerky and uncontrolled as the entity's presence disrupted their energy-based biology. HFY fell to his knees, his skin flashing chaotic colors as his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The creature was beginning to notice them, and its attention felt like ice water in his veins. This was something that had existed before the Alliance, before most of the current species had even evolved. It was ancient and hungry and completely alien to everything they understood about life. Then he heard Jinwoo's voice, calm and steady. "Well, that's new." HFY looked up in amazement. The human captain was standing upright, studying the entity with the same careful attention he might give to a tactical map. There was no fear in his posture, no sign that the creature's mind-breaking presence affected him at all. "Minji, what do you think? Class 7 or Class 8? Jinwoo asked. The human lieutenant was also standing normally, though she had raised her weapon and was scanning for targets among the Void cult members. "Definitely Class 7, maybe High 7. It's big and scary, but it's not actively rewriting reality yet." "Class 7, Daeun agreed, setting down her equipment bag. "Standard containment protocol should work." HFY couldn't understand what he was hearing. These humans were looking at something that drove other species insane, and they were discussing it like a routine problem with a routine solution. "How are you not affected?" he managed to ask through his mental anguish. Jinwoo knelt beside him, his face showing genuine concern for HFY's condition. "Commander, has your species ever told stories about monsters that exist beyond normal understanding? Things so alien and terrible that just knowing about them can drive people insane?" "No," HFY gasped. "Why would anyone create such stories?" "Humans have been telling those stories for thousands of years," Jinwoo explained. "We call it cosmic horror, the idea that the universe contains things so far beyond human understanding that contact with them breaks the mind. We've been mentally preparing for encounters like this since before we had space travel. The entity was becoming more active now, responding to their presence. Tentacles the size of starship hulls began moving through the chamber, and reality started to bend around them. Gravity shifted randomly, making some Alliance members fall toward the ceiling while others were pressed against the walls. The humans adapted instantly. When gravity reversed, they activated magnetic boots. When tentacles swept toward them, they rolled or jumped with practiced efficiency. They moved through the chaos as if they had trained for exactly this situation. "Daeun, how long for the charges?" Minji called out while firing at Void cult members who were trying to protect their master. "Give me 10 minutes, Daeun replied, pulling explosive devices from her bag. "I need to find the right structural points." 10 minutes to do what?" HFY asked. "Bring down the whole facility," Jinwoo said. We can't kill something like this with normal weapons, so we're going to bury it under a few miles of rock and hope that puts it back to sleep. The plan was insane. It was also probably the only thing that would work. While Daeun placed her explosives, Jinwoo and Minji held off the Void Cult defenders. HFY watched in fascination as they fought. They didn't use advanced tactics or special abilities. They simply shot anything that moved toward them and kept shooting until it stopped moving. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they reloaded with smooth efficiency and kept fighting. The entity was becoming more agitated. Its attention turned toward the humans, and HFY felt the weight of its alien consciousness pressing against them. Surely now they would break. Now they would feel the same mind-destroying terror that had overwhelmed every other species. Instead, Minji looked directly at the creature and said, "Yeah, you're really ugly, aren't you?" The entity recoiled. For a moment that felt like hours, there was a sense of confusion from the ancient being. It had expected fear, worship, or madness. It had not expected to be insulted. Humans, Jinwoo explained to the bewildered cosmic horror, don't really do the whole bow down before things beyond understanding bit. We tend to shoot first and ask questions later. Daeun's voice came over the comm. Charges are set. Everyone needs to get out of here in the next 5 minutes. But getting out was easier said than done. The chamber was full of tentacles, reality distortions, and Void Cult members who were becoming more desperate as they realized their god was threatened. The Alliance members who could still move were barely functional. New plan, Jinwoo announced. Minji, help me get the wounded to the exit. Daeun, how much time can you give us? I can delay the charges for 15 minutes, but not longer than that. HFY watched as the 3 humans organized an evacuation under impossible conditions. They carried Alliance members who couldn't walk, guided others who were too mentally damaged to find their way, and fought off attacks from increasingly frantic cultists. All while a cosmic entity that could rewrite the laws of physics writhed in fury around them. And they did it, all with the calm efficiency of people who had dealt with impossible situations before. As they helped him toward the exit, supporting his weight while his mind slowly recovered from contact with the entity, HFY realized something that chilled him more than the cosmic horror they were leaving behind. The humans weren't brave because they didn't understand the danger. They understood it perfectly. They simply didn't care. They had looked at something that could drive entire species insane, evaluated it as a problem to be solved, and gone about solving it with terrifying competence. What kind of species could do that? What kind of evolution produced beings who treated cosmic horror as a routine obstacle? As they reached the surface and ran for the extraction point, Daeun triggered her charges. The ground shook as explosions rippled through the underground facility. Metal spires toppled, and the spiral entrance collapsed in on itself. Miles below, the ancient entity found itself trapped once again under tons of rock and metal. The immediate danger was over, but HFY couldn't shake the feeling that he had learned something about humans that was more disturbing than anything they had found in that underground chamber. The extraction ships arrived just as the underground explosion stopped shaking the ground. HFY was still recovering from his contact with the entity, his skin cycling through confused colors as his mind tried to process what had happened. Around him, other Alliance members were in similar states of shock and mental exhaustion. The humans, by contrast, were already planning their next moves. We need to set up a monitoring station, Jinwoo was saying to his superiors over the radio. Something that big doesn't stay buried forever. When it wakes up again, we want to know about it immediately. When, not if. HFY asked weakly. Oh, it'll definitely wake up again, Minji said matter-of-factly. Things like that always do. But probably not for a few hundred years, and by then we'll have better ways to deal with it. As they boarded the transport ship, HFY noticed that more human vessels had appeared in orbit. These weren't the small escort ships that had brought Jinwoo's team. These were massive warships bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of soldiers. Was all this really necessary? He asked. Daeun looked up from where she was cataloging her remaining explosives. Standard protocol. When we encounter a Class 7 existential threat, we bring enough firepower to glass the entire planet if needed. You would destroy a whole world? If it meant stopping something like that from escaping? Yes. Jinwoo's voice was completely serious. Commander, that thing down there could have consumed entire star systems if it had fully awakened. Destroying one planet to save billions of lives is basic math. HFY felt his skin shift to disturbed purples. The casual way humans discussed planetary destruction was almost as unsettling as the cosmic entity had been. During the flight back to the Harmony's edge, he found himself studying the human military communications. What he discovered made his unease grow worse. The humans had designated the underground entity as a Class 7 existential anomaly. Their classification system went up to Class 12. They had procedures and protocols for threats 5 levels worse than what had just driven half his strike force insane. "Captain Jinwoo," he said, "what would constitute a Class 12 threat in your classification system?" Jinwoo thought for a moment. "Something that could end all existence across multiple dimensions simultaneously. We've never actually encountered one, but we have contingency plans just in case." Contingency plans for the end of all existence? Of course. Just because something seems impossible doesn't mean you shouldn't have a plan for dealing with it. Vexai realized that humans didn't just prepare for cosmic horror. They prepared for things beyond cosmic horror. They had looked at the worst possible scenarios their minds could imagine, and then made plans for scenarios even worse than those. Back aboard the Harmony's edge, the Alliance medical teams worked to help the affected soldiers recover from their psychological trauma. The Alteran PSI warriors would need weeks of mental rehabilitation. Several Krillians were still experiencing energy fluctuations that made their natural abilities unreliable. The humans, meanwhile, were writing reports. Vexai found them in the briefing room, calmly documenting everything that had happened in the underground facility. They described the cosmic entity with the same objective tone they might use for a weather report. Estimated mass, approximately 50 million tons. Primary attack method, psychic assault targeting species with telepathic or energy-based biology. Weakness, conventional kinetic weapons remain effective against physical manifestations. Recommendation, monitor site for increased activity every 6 months. How can you write about it so calmly? Vexai asked. Minji looked up from her report. Because getting emotional about it doesn't help anyone. We saw it, we dealt with it, we contained it. Now we write down what we learned so the next team will be better prepared. The next team? There are always more, Dayun said. Cosmic horrors, ancient evils, things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. Someone has to deal with them. Vexai's skin showed deep confusion. But surely encounters like this are extremely rare? The 3 humans exchanged glances. Then Jinwoo activated a holographic display showing human military records. In the past 50 years since we joined the Alliance, we've responded to 47 incidents involving entities classified as existential threats. Sleeping gods, reality parasites, time-eating constructs, hive minds that consume planets, machines that turn matter into more of themselves. The list went on and on. Each entry was documented with the same calm professionalism, as if dealing with universe-threatening horrors was just another job that needed doing. Most of these incidents happened in regions where Alliance species couldn't operate effectively, Minji added. Places where the local conditions drove other species insane or disrupted their natural abilities. So humans handle the cases that no one else can deal with, Vexai said slowly. Pretty much. We're good at staying functional in impossible situations. As Vexai studied the records, he began to understand something that made his skin flash worried colors. The Alliance had been encountering these existential threats for decades. But instead of developing better ways to deal with them, they had simply started calling in the humans whenever something too strange or dangerous appeared. The humans had become the Alliance's solution to problems that couldn't be solved through normal means. They were the species you called when reality itself was under attack. Do other Alliance members know about all this? He asked. Some do. Most prefer not to think about it, Jinwoo said. They want to believe the universe is safe and orderly. We let them believe that, and we handle the things that prove otherwise. A communication came in from the human fleet commander. Captain Hyuk's image appeared on the display. A stern-looking man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. Captain Jinwoo, good work on the containment. We're establishing a permanent monitoring station in orbit. Command wants to know if you need additional resources. We should be fine, sir. Standard Class 7 protocols were sufficient. Excellent. Oh, and there's been a development. We're getting reports of unusual activity in the Vega system. Something about reality distortions and missing ships. Command wants a human team to investigate. Understood. We'll be ready to deploy in 6 hours. The communication ended and Vexai stared at the humans. You're leaving already? Don't you need time to recover from what happened down there? Recover from what? Minji asked, genuinely puzzled. From encountering that thing. From seeing something that challenged everything you thought you knew about reality. Commander, Jinwoo said gently. That thing didn't challenge what we thought we knew about reality. We already knew reality was full of horrible things trying to kill us. That's why we carry so many guns. As the human ships prepared to leave for their next mission, Vexhai remained in the observation chamber, watching them depart. His skin cycled through complex patterns of thought and emotion as he tried to understand what he had witnessed. The Alliance had always viewed humans as the newcomers to galactic civilization, a young species that needed guidance and protection as they learned to navigate the complexities of interstellar relations, but the truth was exactly the opposite. The Alliance needed protection from things it couldn't even comprehend, and humans were the ones providing that protection. They had become the guardians of a civilization too peaceful and advanced to protect itself from the universe's darkest corners. And they did it all with the casual competence of people who had never expected the universe to be safe in the first place. 3 weeks after the mission, Vexhai found himself unable to focus on normal duties. The other Alliance members who had been in the underground chamber were receiving psychological treatment and slowly returning to regular assignments. But Vexhai couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen, not the cosmic entity, but the humans who had dealt with it so easily. He spent his free time in the ship's data archives, accessing human historical records and cultural files. What he found there disturbed him more than any alien horror could. Human history was an endless catalog of violence, suffering, and existential dread. Wars that killed millions, diseases that wiped out entire populations, weapons capable of destroying their whole planet. They had lived with the constant knowledge that their species could end at any moment, through their own actions or through cosmic accident. But worse than their history was their fiction. Humans had spent centuries imagining encounters with cosmic horror, ancient evils, and things that existed beyond human understanding. They had stories about gods that drove people insane, creatures from other dimensions that consumed reality itself, and machines that could rewrite the laws of physics. And in every story, humans either fought back or found ways to survive. They've been preparing for this their entire civilization, Vexhai murmured to himself as he read through human literature, stories by writers with names like Lovecraft, King, and countless others who had imagined horrors that Alliance species had never dreamed of. His reading was interrupted by Captain Jinwoo entering the archives. The human looked tired but alert, as if he had just returned from another dangerous mission. Commander Vexhai, Jinwoo said with a polite bow. I heard you were researching human culture. Any particular reason? Vexhai's skin shifted to honest blues. I'm trying to understand how your species can remain functional in situations that break other minds. The entity we encountered should have affected you the same way it affected us. Jinwoo sat down across from him, his expression thoughtful. May I ask you something, Commander? What's the worst thing that's ever happened to your people? The Great Famine about 3,000 years ago. Crop failures led to resource shortages. We lost perhaps 2% of our population before developing better agricultural techniques. 2%, Jinwoo repeated quietly. Commander, humans have never gone more than a few generations without losing significant portions of our population to war, disease, or natural disasters. We've had individual battles where we lost more people in a single day than your species lost in your worst famine. Vexhai felt his skin show disturbed patterns. That's horrible. Yes, it is. But it also means we're used to horrible things. When we encountered that entity in the underground chamber, it was just another horrible thing in a universe full of them. But how do you maintain sanity? How do you function knowing that such threats exist? Jinwoo smiled sadly. Because someone has to. Commander, when humans first reached space and discovered the Alliance, we thought we were joining a community of species who could help make the universe safer. What we found instead was a collection of peaceful civilizations that had never learned to deal with true danger. He activated a small display showing star charts. The Alliance controls about 40% of known space. But do you know what exists in the other 60%? Dead zones where reality doesn't work properly. Ancient battlefields that still echo with psychic screams. Entire systems consumed by things that used to be planets but became something else. And worse things that I won't describe because thinking about them too much attracts their attention. Vexhai stared at the display. The Alliance has always avoided those regions. Of course you have. Your species are too valuable and too vulnerable to risk in places like that. So humans go instead. We map the danger zones, contain the threats, and make sure they don't spread to inhabited space. You're saying that humans are vexes. I struggled to find the words. We're the thing that stands between civilization and everything that wants to destroy it, Jinwoo said simply. It's not a job we asked for, but it's a job we're good at. As if summoned by their conversation, Minji appeared in the archives. She looked excited about something, which Vexhai had learned was usually a dangerous sign. Captain, we just got word from the Vega system mission, she said. It was another ancient AI that had gained control of local spacetime. The team managed to shut it down, but they found something interesting in its memory banks. She activated a hologram showing a galactic map covered in red warning markers. There were hundreds of them, scattered throughout the galaxy like a rash of danger signs. These are all locations where the AI detected what it classified as reality hazards, Minji explained. Things like what we found in the underground chamber, but potentially worse. Some of them are already active. Vexhai felt his skin go pale with shock. There are hundreds of them. At least hundreds. The AI sensors only covered about 10% of the galaxy. Minji's excitement was unsettling. Command is putting together expedition teams to investigate the closest ones. We're going to be busy. After Minji left, Vexhai sat in silence for a long time. The scope of what humans were dealing with was beyond anything he had imagined. The Alliance lived in safety because humans were quietly fighting a war against cosmic horror itself. Captain, he finally said, are you ever afraid? Jinwoo considered the question carefully. Every day. But being afraid doesn't help anyone. What helps is being prepared, being competent, and being willing to do what needs to be done no matter how unpleasant it might be. And if you fail, if one of these threats proves to be too much for humans to handle, then we keep fighting until we can't fight anymore. And then the next team tries a different approach. That's what humans do, Commander. We don't give up. Over the following months, Vexhai continued to observe human operations throughout Alliance space. He watched as human teams deployed to investigate strange signals, contain reality anomalies, and deal with threats that had no names in any Alliance language. He saw humans face down entities that could rewrite the laws of physics with nothing but determination and carefully planned tactics. He watched them sacrifice themselves to save alien civilizations that would never even know their names. He observed them treat universe-ending threats as routine work assignments, and slowly, he began to understand the true horror of the situation. It wasn't that humans were fearless. They were terrified, just like any sane being would be when faced with cosmic horror. But they had learned to function despite their fear, to think clearly in the face of madness, and to take action when action seemed impossible. The Alliance had created a peaceful, advanced civilization by avoiding the universe's darkest corners. They had achieved safety by simply not going to dangerous places. Humans had achieved safety by going to those dangerous places and making them less dangerous. The real horror wasn't the cosmic entities or reality warping anomalies or ancient evils that lurked in the dark corners of space. The real horror was the realization that somewhere in the universe, there had evolved a species capable of looking at ultimate darkness and saying, we can handle this. In his final report on the mission, Vexhai wrote, I fought beside humans today and I saw true horror. The horror wasn't the cosmic entity that sought to devour reality itself. The horror was realizing that in a universe full of monsters, humans are the ones the monsters should fear. He submitted the report and requested a transfer to a research position far from any region where human military operations were active. His request was approved immediately. As his transport ship carried him away from the frontier regions where humans did their work, Vexhai looked back at the stars they protected and felt a complex mix of gratitude and terror. The Alliance was safe because humans existed to keep it safe. But what did it say about the universe that such protectors were necessary? And what did it say about humans that they were so perfectly suited for the job? Somewhere in the dark between stars, another human team was probably deploying to face another impossible threat. They would study it, classify it, and find a way to contain or destroy it. Then they would file a report and move on to the next crisis. And the Alliance would continue to sleep peacefully, never knowing how many monsters had been slain to preserve their dreams. Vexhai closed his eyes and tried not to think. about what would happen if humanity ever decided they were tired of being the universe's guardians. Some thoughts he had learned were too dangerous to pursue. But in the deepest part of his mind, he suspected he already knew the answer. The universe would belong to the monsters again. And perhaps it always had until humans arrived to take it back.